Welcome to the Buddhism Podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that touches all of us, regardless of our spiritual background or meditation experience: transforming anger through Buddhist practice. I remember one of my most humbling anger moments vividly. I was stuck in gridlock traffic, already running late for an important meeting, when someone cut me off and took the parking spot I'd been patiently waiting for. In an instant, I transformed from a supposedly mindful meditation teacher into a horn-honking, gesture-making embodiment of rage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had just come from teaching a workshop on compassion. That moment became a powerful wake-up call. If my decades of Buddhist practice couldn't help me navigate a minor traffic annoyance, what was it really worth? This question led me deeper into Buddhist teachings on anger, where I discovered approaches that were far more nuanced and practical than the popular notion that Buddhists should never get angry. We're exploring this topic at a time when anger seems particularly prevalent. Studies show that 45% of people regularly lose their temper at work, while road rage incidents have increased by 30% in the last decade. The health impacts are equally concerning. Chronic anger increases heart disease risk by 230% and can suppress your immune system for up to 6 hours after an angry episode. Yet most approaches to anger management fall into one of two unhelpful extremes: either suppressing anger, pushing it down where it festers, or venting anger, expressing it in ways that often cause harm. Buddhist psychology offers a middle path that neither denies anger nor gives it free rein. Before we dive in, let's clear up a common misconception. Buddhism doesn't ask us to eliminate anger or to never feel angry. The Buddha himself experienced anger. What made him extraordinary was how he worked with it. The goal isn't becoming some anger-free spiritual robot, but developing a wiser relationship with this powerful emotion. Today I'll share a practical 5-part framework drawn from Buddhist teachings but accessible to everyone. Regardless of your spiritual background, we'll explore mindful recognition, learning to catch anger early, creating space, pausing before we react, wise investigation, looking beneath the surface, skillful expression, communicating without causing harm, and compassionate response, addressing the needs beneath the anger. What makes this approach unique is that it treats anger neither as a moral failure nor as something to be blindly expressed. Instead, the Buddha taught that anger, like all emotions, can be a doorway to greater wisdom when approached with mindfulness and compassion. The Dalai Lama puts it beautifully: anger that is motivated by compassion or a desire to correct social injustice, and does not seek to harm the other person, is a good anger that is worth having. This nuanced understanding gives us a framework for working with anger in ways that neither suppress our authentic experience nor harm ourselves or others. So whether you're dealing with minor irritations or profound rage, whether your anger emerges in traffic jams or tense family discussions, the practices we'll explore today offer a path to transforming this challenging emotion from something that controls us into energy we can work with skillfully. Let's begin our exploration of anger, not as something to fear or eliminate, but as a powerful force that, when transformed, can fuel compassion, set healthy boundaries, and even catalyze positive change in ourselves and our world. To transform anger, we need to first understand what it actually is, and Buddhist psychology offers some fascinating insights that differ significantly from Western views. The first crucial distinction is between anger as energy and anger as story. When anger arises, there's the immediate bodily sensation, a flush of heat, quickened heartbeat, tightening in the chest or jaw. This is anger as pure energy. Then there's the narrative our minds quickly spin around that energy. He always does this. She never respects my time. They're deliberately trying to hurt me. This is anger as story. Buddhist practice invites us to separate these two aspects, because while the energy of anger arises naturally and passes relatively quickly if not fueled, the stories we tell can keep anger burning for years, even decades. I know people still angry about comments made to them in high school. Not because the energy of that moment persists, but because the story keeps being rehearsed. In the Pali Canon, the earliest Buddhist texts, the Buddha distinguishes 3 types of anger. There's quick arising, quick passing anger that's like a line drawn in water. It appears and then vanishes without a trace. There's moderate anger, like a line drawn in sand. It lasts longer but is eventually erased by the waves. And there's persistent anger, like a line carved in stone, lasting potentially for years, causing deep suffering to ourselves and others. Interestingly, The Buddha wasn't particularly concerned with the first type. Quick arising irritation that passes without causing harm is simply part of having a human nervous system. What concerned him was anger that persists and intensifies, leading to harmful speech and actions. His teachings focus on preventing that escalation. This brings us to another important distinction: anger versus aggression. Anger is an emotion, a natural physiological and psychological response to perceived threats, unmet needs, or boundary violations. Aggression is a behavior, a choice to express anger in ways that cause harm. Buddhist ethics has no problem with anger as an emotion, but it does guide us away from aggressive speech and action. So how does anger function in the mind? According to Buddhist psychology, the Abhidhamma, Buddhist psychological teachings, describes anger as arising from a complex interplay of conditions, including not just the immediate trigger, but our past experiences, current physical state, beliefs, and perceptions. This means there's not a direct line between someone's action and our anger. Rather, their action meets our interpretation, history, and current state to produce the emotion. This is actually good news, because it means we're not helpless victims of others' behaviors. We have multiple points of intervention in the arising of anger. We can't always control external triggers, but we can work with our interpretations, physical responses, and reactive patterns. Perhaps most revolutionary is the Buddhist idea that anger, when approached with mindfulness, can actually reveal deep wisdom. Beneath anger, we often find important information about our boundaries, needs, and values. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition particularly emphasizes this perspective, viewing anger's underlying energy as clarity that, when transformed, becomes discriminating wisdom, the ability to see clearly what is harmful and what is beneficial. This compassionate view reframes anger as a signal, often indicating important unmet needs or boundaries that require attention. When someone steps on your foot, pain tells you to move your foot or ask them to step off. Similarly, anger often signals a boundary violation or unmet need that requires addressing. What doesn't work, according to Buddhist psychology, is suppressing anger. The Buddha used the analogy of trying to stop a rushing river by pushing against it with your hands, not only ineffective but likely to exhaust you. When we push anger down, it doesn't disappear, it goes underground, emerging later in passive-aggressive behavior, physical illness, depression, or explosive outbursts. The middle way approach to anger isn't indulging it through venting or rumination, nor is it suppressing the emotion. Instead, it's about relating to anger mindfully, allowing ourselves to feel the energy while not being consumed by the stories that fuel it. This approach sees anger neither as a moral failure nor as something to blindly express, but as a natural human emotion that, with skillful attention, can actually deepen our wisdom and compassion. As Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully expressed it, anger is like a howling baby, suffering and crying. The baby needs his mother to embrace him. You are that mother. Anger is not your enemy. Anger is your baby. This compassionate perspective creates the foundation for our practical work with anger, which begins with the essential first step, recognizing anger as it arises. Before we're caught in its grip, let's explore how to develop that crucial skill. The journey of transforming anger begins with a seemingly simple yet profound step: recognizing anger when it first arises. This might sound obvious. Surely we know when we're angry, right? But the fascinating reality is that most of us don't catch anger until we're already in its grip, when our rational thinking has already been hijacked by this powerful emotion. Buddhist practice offers a remarkably effective approach to developing this early warning system through what's called mindfulness of the body. Our bodies typically signal anger long before our conscious minds register it. These physical cues are like the rumble of distant thunder before a storm. If we learn to notice them, we have precious time to take skillful action. What are these physical signs? They vary from person to person, but common signals include a flush of heat in the face or chest, tightening of the jaw or shoulders, quickened breathing, a surge of energy in the arms or legs, or a flutter in the stomach. For me, it's a specific sensation of heat rising up my neck and into my ears. That's my personal anger alert system. Recognizing these bodily signals requires regular attention to physical sensations, something many of us have been trained to ignore in our head-centered culture. This is where regular meditation practice creates a tremendous advantage. Even 5 minutes daily of simply noticing physical sensations builds the awareness that helps us catch anger early. Beyond physical cues, There are mental signs of anger's approach, recurring thoughts about being wronged, mental rehearsals of arguments, black and white thinking, or an internal narrative that uses words like always or never. He always ignores my input, or she never appreciates what I do. These absolutist terms are reliable flags that anger is coloring our thinking. A powerful framework for working with anger as it arises is the RAIN approach developed by meditation teacher Tara Brach. Recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. Today we're focusing on that crucial first step, recognize. Simply naming the emotion as it begins creates a tiny but significant space between us and the feeling. It's the difference between I am angry and I notice anger arising. Try this simple but powerful name and note practice. When you feel the first whisper of irritation or anger, silently name it in your mind. Anger is present, or simply anger. Then note the physical sensations and thoughts that accompany it, without judging them or yourself for having them. This act of naming helps activate your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, which tends to go offline when anger takes over. One of the biggest obstacles to recognition is our discomfort with anger itself. Many spiritually inclined people have internalized the idea that they shouldn't feel angry, leading to a kind of anger blindness where we relabel our anger as something more acceptable. I'm not angry, I'm just concerned, or I'm not angry, I'm passionate about justice. While these other emotions might coexist with anger, denying anger's presence prevents us from working skillfully with it. In Buddhist practice, there's no emotion that's off limits to awareness. Everything is welcome in the field of mindfulness. As Zen teacher Susan Murphy says, the only way out is through, and the only way through is in. Recognizing anger without shame or alarm is the essential gateway to transformation. It's particularly important to develop sensitivity to subtle forms of anger, the minor irritations, judgments, or resentments that we might usually overlook. These smaller angers often accumulate over time, creating a reservoir of reactivity that can then explode over seemingly minor triggers. By catching these subtle forms early, we prevent this dangerous accumulation. Let's practice this recognition skill together. Take a moment to recall a recent situation where you felt mild to moderate irritation or anger. As you bring this to mind, scan your body for the physical sensations that accompanied the feeling. Where exactly did you feel it? What qualities did the sensation have? Was it hot or cold? Tight or expansive? Moving or still? Now notice what thoughts were present. Was there a story about being wronged? Were there judgments about yourself or others? Simply observe these thoughts without getting caught in them. Finally, can you name the emotion? This is irritation, this is frustration, or this is anger. Notice how this simple act of naming creates a small but significant space around the emotion. This practice of mindful recognition becomes more accessible with regular attention. Many find it helpful to set mindfulness bells throughout their day, perhaps checking in with their emotional state whenever they receive a text message or stop at a red light. These regular check-ins build the awareness muscle that allows us to catch anger early. Remember, this step isn't about eliminating anger or even changing it yet, it's simply about seeing it clearly as it begins to arise. This moment of recognition is actually a moment of profound freedom, the point where we can choose our response rather than being driven by reactivity. As Viktor Frankl wisely noted, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. In our next section, we'll explore how to intentionally expand that space, giving ourselves room to respond to anger with wisdom rather than being carried away by its momentum. Once you've recognized anger arising, the next crucial step is creating space, a buffer zone between the trigger and your response. This space is where freedom lives. Without it, we're like a puppet on anger's string, reacting in ways we often later regret. With it, we gain the precious opportunity to choose how we respond. The Buddha had a fascinating teaching about what he called mind moments, the incredibly brief units of consciousness that string together to create our experience. He taught that between each trigger and reaction, there are actually several mind moments where choice is possible. Through practice, we can learn to expand these moments from microseconds into seconds or even minutes, creating what I call the sacred pause. This isn't just spiritual theory. Neuroscience confirms that when we're triggered, our amygdala, the brain's alarm system, activates before our prefrontal cortex, our wise, rational brain center, comes online. On average, it takes about 90 seconds for the initial neurochemical response of anger to flush through our system. Our practice is to create enough space to let this happen without adding fuel through our thoughts or actions. Let me share 3 emergency techniques specifically designed for intense anger moments when you need immediate space. First is the sacred pause with breathing. When you feel anger's heat rising, pause and take 3 deliberate breaths. Make your exhales slightly longer than your inhales, perhaps counting to 4 on the inhale and 6 on the exhale. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode that counterbalances the fight or flight response of anger. I call this breathing yourself back to choice. The second technique is physical grounding. Anger tends to create a floating, untethered sensation as energy rises upward in the body. Counteract this by literally grounding yourself. Feel your feet on the floor. Press your fingertips together, or place your palms on your thighs. This physical anchoring helps prevent the carried away feeling that often accompanies strong anger. Third is the mental noting practice. When anger stories start spinning, "I can't believe she did that again," or "he always disrespects me," mentally note them as story or thinking. This creates slight distance from the narrative without suppressing the feeling. It's like watching a movie and momentarily remembering that it's just a film. You're still engaged, but not completely lost in it. These techniques are especially valuable because they're invisible to others. No one knows you're doing your 3-breath practice in the middle of a heated meeting or grounding yourself during a tense family dinner. These are stealth mindfulness practices you can deploy anywhere without drawing attention. Of course, sometimes the wisest move is to literally create physical space by temporarily removing yourself from the triggering situation. The Buddha actually recommended this, suggesting that when anger is strong, changing your environment can be the most skillful choice. This isn't escaping, it's strategic withdrawal to regain your center. If you need to step away, it's helpful to communicate this in a way that doesn't escalate tension. Instead of storming out or using your departure as a weapon, try simple statements like, "I need a moment to collect my thoughts," or "I want to continue this conversation when I can be more present." This signals respect while creating necessary space. The key to all these space-creating practices is preparation and commitment. The time to decide how you'll handle anger is not in the heated moment, but in advance. When you're calm and clear, make a specific plan. When I notice anger arising, I will take 3 breaths before responding, or if I feel overwhelmed, I'll excuse myself for 5 minutes. This pre-commitment is crucial because once anger arises, the part of your brain that would make such wise decisions is often temporarily offline. Let's practice the 3 breaths technique together now. Close your eyes if that's comfortable, or simply soften your gaze. Imagine a situation that typically triggers mild irritation for you. As you visualize this scenario, notice any physical sensations or thoughts that arise. Now, take 3 intentional breaths. For the first breath, simply acknowledge the presence of anger or irritation. This is anger. For the second breath, feel the physical sensations in your body without trying to change them. Just allow them to be present in your awareness. For the third breath, remind yourself that you have choice in how you respond. I can choose my next step. Feel how these 3 simple breaths create a container around the angry energy, not suppressing it, but holding it in awareness rather than being consumed by it. What makes this practice powerful is its simplicity and portability. You don't need special equipment or environments. Your breath is always with you, always available as an anchor of awareness. One meditation student shared how this practice transformed her relationship with her teenager. Previously, her son's dismissive tone would instantly trigger reactive anger, leading to shouting matches. After practicing the 3-breath pause, she found she could create just enough space to respond rather than react. The arguments didn't disappear overnight, but their intensity and frequency dramatically decreased. Remember, the goal isn't to never feel angry. The goal is to create enough space around anger that you can work with it skillfully rather than having it work you. As meditation teacher Jack Kornfield says, peace is not about the absence of strong emotion. It's about having the capacity to hold emotion in loving awareness. This capacity to create space around anger opens the door to our next step, looking beneath the surface with wise investigation. Once we've created this container of awareness, we can begin to explore what's really going on, which often reveals surprising insights about ourselves and others. Once you've recognized anger and created space around it, You're ready for one of the most transformative steps in working with anger: wise investigation. This is where Buddhist practice moves beyond simple anger management into profound territory that can actually transform your relationship with this challenging emotion. Wise investigation is about looking beneath the surface of anger with kind, curious attention. It's like being an emotional detective, searching for the deeper currents beneath the waves of anger. This practice draws on the Buddha's teaching about the second arrow, the idea that when something difficult happens, we experience two kinds of suffering: the initial pain, first arrow, and then our reaction to that pain, second arrow. Investigation helps us identify and avoid that second arrow. The approach is simple but powerful: bring gentle, non-judgmental awareness to your anger, as if you're studying an interesting natural phenomenon rather than being caught in a personal drama. This quality of kind curiosity is essential. We're not interrogating our anger with hostility, but inviting it to reveal its deeper nature. Here are 4 questions that can guide this wise investigation. I suggest exploring them in order, giving each one enough space to reveal its insights. First, what am I really angry about? Often, what triggers our anger isn't what we're truly angry about. The coworker's comment in a meeting might trigger anger, but beneath it might be feeling unappreciated over many months. Your partner's forgotten errand might spark irritation, but beneath could be a deeper fear about not being prioritized. This question helps us distinguish between triggers and underlying causes. Second, what am I afraid of? This question often reveals surprising insights. Because anger almost always has an underlying fear, we might be afraid of being disrespected, abandoned, controlled, or found inadequate. Anger often serves as a protective cover for these more vulnerable emotions. A client once realized her anger at her boss wasn't really about his abrupt emails, but about her deep fear of professional inadequacy those emails triggered. This insight completely changed their dynamic. Third, what do I need right now? Anger frequently signals unmet needs for respect, autonomy, connection, rest, or acknowledgement. When we identify these needs, we can often address them directly rather than expressing anger indirectly. This shifts us from blaming others to taking responsibility for getting our needs met in constructive ways. Fourth, what might the other person need? This widening of perspective doesn't negate our own needs but adds crucial context. Perhaps the person who triggered your anger is themselves exhausted, frightened, or feeling unheard. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but understanding others' needs creates the possibility for solutions that address everyone's underlying concerns. A critical aspect of wise investigation is distinguishing between story and direct experience. Direct experience is what's happening in your body and emotions right now. Story is the narrative your mind creates about what these sensations mean. For example, feeling heat in your chest is direct experience. He's always trying to undermine me is story. Buddhist practice encourages us to stay close to direct experience, which is always happening in the present moment, rather than getting lost in stories about the past or future. This doesn't mean stories are meaningless. They often contain important information, but they can also trap us in reactive patterns and obscure what's really happening. Try this brief practice. Bring to mind something that's currently creating mild to moderate irritation in your life. Notice any story you have about this situation, the narrative about what it means, why it's happening, whose fault it is. Now, gently shift attention to the direct experience in your body right now as you think about this situation. Where do you feel sensations? What qualities do they have? Can you stay with these physical sensations for a few moments without jumping back into the story? This ability to distinguish between story and direct experience is crucial for finding the wisdom within anger. Because yes, anger contains wisdom, often important messages about our boundaries, values, and needs. When we can separate the wisdom from the reactivity, anger becomes a powerful teacher rather than a destructive force. The role of compassion in this investigation cannot be overstated. We're not coldly analyzing our anger but meeting it with warmth and care. This compassion naturally extends both to ourselves, acknowledging that anger arises from genuine pain, and eventually to others. As we recognize the universal human struggles that drive difficult behavior, one powerful insight that often emerges from wise investigation is that our strongest anger is frequently connected to our deepest values. We get angriest when things we really care about are threatened. Someone passionate about fairness gets angry at injustice. Someone who values reliability gets angry at broken promises. Seen this way, anger can actually reveal what matters most to us. a kind of inverted map of our core values. A meditation student shared how this investigation transformed her relationship with her father. For years, his critical comments would instantly trigger her anger. Through investigation, she discovered that beneath her anger was fear. Fear that she'd never be good enough, and beneath that fear was a deep need for acceptance. When she could communicate this need directly rather than responding with defensive anger, their relationship fundamentally shifted. This investigative process might sound time-consuming, but with practice, it can happen quite quickly. Even a 30-second pause to ask, "What am I really angry about? What do I need?" can dramatically shift how you respond to triggering situations. And while the full investigation often happens in quieter reflection after an angry episode, even brief moments of inquiry during a triggering situation can create significant shifts. Remember that this investigation isn't about psychoanalyzing yourself or getting lost in mental concepts. It's a living inquiry, grounded in bodily awareness and present moment experience. We're not trying to figure anger out intellectually, but to understand it from the inside through direct observation. As you develop this capacity for wise investigation, you'll likely discover that anger isn't a monolithic emotion but contains layers of other feelings: hurt, fear, disappointment, grief, that have been obscured by anger's intensity. This nuanced understanding naturally leads to more skillful expression, which we'll explore in our next section. The Buddha described this investigative process as being like a skilled surgeon who can locate and extract a splinter with precision and care. With practice, we develop the same precision with our emotional states, able to identify and work with the deeper causes of our anger rather than being overwhelmed by its surface manifestations. After recognizing anger, creating space around it, and investigating its deeper nature, we arrive at perhaps the most practical question: how do we actually express this energy skillfully? Because let's be honest, understanding anger is valuable, but eventually we need to communicate and take action in our relationships and communities. This is where the Buddha's teachings on right speech offer profound guidance. In the Abhaya Sutta, the Buddha provided 3 criteria for skillful communication. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it timely? Notice that truth alone isn't sufficient. Our expression also needs to be beneficial and well-timed. This creates a wise middle path between harmful expression and unhealthy suppression of anger. What does this look like in practice? Let's start with what skillful expression is not. It's not unleashing a torrent of blame and criticism, which usually triggers defensiveness rather than understanding. It's also not sugarcoating our concerns to avoid conflict, which prevents authentic resolution. And it's certainly not passive-aggressive behavior, where we express anger indirectly through sarcasm, withdrawal, or sabotage. Instead, skillful expression communicates clearly about our experience while remaining open to dialogue. A helpful framework comes from nonviolent communication, developed by Marshall Rosenberg but remarkably aligned with Buddhist principles. This approach suggests structuring difficult communications around 4 components: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. Observations are descriptions of specific behaviors without evaluation or judgment. Instead of, "You're so inconsiderate," an observation would be, "You arrived 30 minutes after our agreed meeting time." Notice how the first invites defensiveness, while the second simply states what happened. Feelings express your emotional experience without blaming others for causing it. "I feel frustrated and concerned," rather than, "You're making me angry." This ownership of our emotions creates space for dialogue rather than debate. Needs identify what's important to you that relates to these feelings. "I need clarity about our agreements and to use my time efficiently," communicates your underlying values without accusation. Requests, not demands, express specific, doable actions that would address your needs. "Would you be willing to text me if you're running more than 5 minutes late?" offers a concrete path forward rather than just expressing dissatisfaction. This might sound like an awkward formula at first, but with practice, it becomes a natural way to express difficult emotions clearly while minimizing harm. I've seen it transform seemingly intractable conflicts in families, workplaces, and communities. The Buddha also emphasized the importance of timing in communication. There are moments when even the most skillfully worded message won't be received well, perhaps because the other person is overwhelmed. You're still too activated to communicate clearly, or the setting doesn't allow for meaningful dialogue. Wise discernment about timing is as important as the content of our communication. Sometimes the most skillful immediate response is silence, not as a punishment or withdrawal, but as a compassionate recognition that conditions aren't right for productive exchange. The Buddha actually recommended this approach in situations where speaking would only escalate tension. This isn't about suppressing our truth, but about choosing when and how to express it for maximum benefit and minimum harm. A practical technique for skillful expression is what I call the I notice, I feel, I need formula. When anger arises in a relationship, try this structure. I notice, objective observation. I feel, emotion. I need, underlying need. For example, I notice you've been on your phone during our conversation. I feel disconnected and concerned. I need to know that we can have focused time together. This approach keeps the focus on your experience rather than attacking the other person's character. It invites conversation rather than provoking defensiveness. And importantly, it honors the truth of your anger while expressing it in a way that can actually lead to positive change. Let's practice this together. Think of a situation where you've recently felt angry or irritated with someone important in your life. How might you express this using the structure we've discussed? Start with an objective observation of what happened, without judgment or exaggeration. Then identify the feeling this created for you. Finally, connect this to your underlying need or value. Take a moment to formulate this in your mind or even write it down if you're able. Now, imagine expressing this to the person involved. Notice how different this feels from either blaming them or suppressing your truth. There's a centered quality to this kind of communication, neither collapsing into accommodation nor exploding into aggression. What's particularly beautiful about this approach is how it transforms anger from a divisive force into a potential bridge of understanding. When we express anger skillfully, we often discover that what seemed like conflict was actually a misalignment of unrecognized needs and values on both sides. A workshop participant shared how this transformed her relationship with her teenage son. Their interactions had become a cycle of anger and withdrawal. Instead of her usual, "Why can't you ever clean up after yourself?" judgment, she tried, "When I see dishes left in the living room, I feel frustrated because I need some order in our shared spaces to feel relaxed at home. Would you be willing to bring your dishes to the kitchen before you go to bed?" This opened a conversation that revealed her son's need for autonomy and led to agreements that worked for both of them. Of course, there are situations where direct expression to the person who triggered our anger isn't possible or wise. Perhaps they're unavailable, unsafe to communicate with, or no longer in our lives. In these cases, other outlets for skillful expression become important: journal writing, conversations with trusted friends, or even formal practices like writing unsent letters. These approaches honor the truth of our anger without causing further harm. It's worth acknowledging that skillful expression often feels vulnerable. There's a seeming paradox here. Expressing anger appropriately actually requires us to touch the more tender emotions beneath it. It's usually easier in the moment to lash out in blame or withdraw in silence than to reveal our genuine hurt, fear, or longing. This vulnerability requires courage, but it's precisely what makes authentic resolution possible. The Buddhist path doesn't ask us to stop experiencing anger but invites us to express it in ways aligned with our deepest values of compassion and wisdom. As we practice this skillful expression, we discover that anger, when transformed, can actually strengthen rather than damage our connections with others and ourselves. As we bring our exploration of transforming anger to a close, let's gather the threads of what we've discovered together. We've explored a 5-part framework drawn from Buddhist wisdom but accessible to everyone regardless of spiritual background. Mindful recognition of anger as it arises, creating space before responding, wise investigation of anger's deeper nature, and skillful expression that honors truth without causing harm. These practices work together as an integrated whole. Recognition gives us the crucial early awareness that anger is arising. Space creation provides the pause that makes choice possible. Investigation reveals the deeper needs and fears beneath anger's surface. And skillful expression allows us to communicate our truth in ways that build understanding rather than walls. What makes the Buddhist approach to anger unique is that it aims neither for anger's elimination nor its uninhibited expression. Instead, it offers a middle path of transformation, where anger's energy is neither suppressed nor unleashed destructively, but channeled into clarity, boundary setting, and sometimes even compassionate action. As the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh explains, anger is like electricity. It can be destructive or constructive, depending on how we use it. Recent research in neuroscience and psychology affirms the wisdom of this approach. Studies show that neither suppressing anger nor venting it leads to resolution or well-being. What works is the mindful awareness that allows us to feel anger fully while not being controlled by it, exactly what Buddhist practice cultivates. I encourage you to begin with smaller irritations rather than your most triggering situations. Like any skill, working with anger develops through practice. The daily annoyances of traffic, technology frustrations, or minor interpersonal frictions provide perfect opportunities to strengthen these capacities before applying them to more challenging relationships or situations. Remember that this is a practice, not a perfect. There will be times when you get caught in anger's grip before you can recognize it. When you react before creating space, or when you express anger in ways you later regret. The path isn't about never stumbling, it's about picking ourselves up with compassion and beginning again. Each time we catch anger even slightly earlier or respond with slightly more wisdom, we're creating new neural pathways that make skillful responses more accessible in the future. What's particularly hopeful about this approach is that anger, when transformed, actually contains tremendous wisdom and energy. The same force that can destroy relationships can also, when skillfully channeled, set healthy boundaries, motivate positive change, and even fuel compassionate action in the world. Many of history's most important social justice movements have been powered by what we might call transmuted anger, the energy of outrage transformed into determined, principled action. In our next episode, we'll explore loving kindness meditation for difficult relationships, a powerful complement to the anger practices we've discussed today. Where today's practices help us work skillfully with challenging emotions as they arise. Loving kindness meditation helps cultivate the heart qualities that create greater resilience and perspective in difficult relationships. Before we close, I invite you to take a moment for reflection. Consider one area in your life where anger regularly arises, perhaps a challenging relationship, a recurring situation, or a particular trigger. How might applying one aspect of what we've explored today shift your experience? Perhaps committing to the 3-breath pause when this trigger appears, or investigating the underlying needs behind your anger, or expressing your truth more skillfully using the structure we practiced. The Buddha taught that our practice isn't separate from our life. It's not something we do on a cushion and then leave behind. It's a continuous thread of awareness woven through every aspect of our experience. Working skillfully with anger is one of the most practical and profound expressions of this integration, transforming one of our most challenging emotions into a pathway toward greater wisdom, freedom, and compassionate connection. Thank you for exploring this powerful practice with me today. May these teachings support you in transforming anger's fire into the light of understanding and the warmth of compassion for yourself and all beings.